Hey everyone, it's Heather Darnall. Welcome back to my art channel. Thank you for being here. So recently I went on a little mini shopping spree and I was just really zeroed in on buying some iridescent paints, which if you don't know what those are, it's just a specialty paint. So depending what color you have, when the light reflects it, it just can give off a different shade or tint to it, which makes it super awesome. But anyway, I don't know why I was just really focused on buying more iridescent paints, and I don't need more iridescent paints. I don't really need anything else. I have everything that I need and can possibly maybe want, at least now. So for some reason, I was just wrongfully coveting, really bored. And then for me, when I'm bored, I just start thinking about things that I want or could do anyway. So if you're like me, you can probably feel the same pain. So I got sucked in and just was buying more paints. And I feel really bad because I didn't really consult with my husband and say, hey, I'd really like to buy these paints. Is it okay? And he always says yes anyways, but I really should have consulted him. But the funny thing is he turns around and he ends up buying me like 2 more. So I guess he saw the shopping cart and was like, oh man, she actually might need these paints. Let me help her out. Let me give her a couple of more that I think she would like. And yes, that is so sweet of him, you guys. My husband rocks. So now I actually really do need to use them since he bought more for me. So at first I wasn't sure what I was going to paint to justify all these colors. But then I came across some really beautiful pictures of the Northern Lights. And I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. That's what we're doing. But I also wanted to include a different paint and see what it comes out like at the end. So stay tuned for that, which is a phosphorescent paint I had bought a long time ago, but never used it. So let's see how it looks when the daylight reflects the painting and then when it looks like in a dark room. So, and these Northern Lights are just, I don't know, but man, talk about another way God displays his magnificent mysteries, just in such sheer beauty. Also, before ministry snack, the last video I posted, I showed you guys or let you guys know I have a new book release, Reps for Jesus, Spiritual and Muscular Gains. It is obviously about health and fitness. That is my former life. But it's also how to grow spiritually. So if you guys want to get a copy yourself, just check out the description. The link is in there. Now onto our ministry snack. It's a little bit of a lengthier one than I usually put in here, but this one really spoke to me just from some things I've been noticing, witnessing, and kind of dealing with in my own life. So here it goes. It's from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 2 through 17. So hang on. All right, it reads, during supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and taking a towel tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, the one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him, and that was why he had said, not all of you are clean. When he washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should also do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is his messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do know them. Oh my gosh, you guys, I know that was a little bit more than a snack. That was like a meal. And I'm so sorry. Thank you for sticking it out to hear all that. But it was, to me, that's super juicy, you guys. That's a lot in there. And I just felt like I better include as much as I can so that everything that I say hopefully makes sense, because you're able to pick up tidbits from what I read and it will all come together. But the Passover Feast was just the feast they still celebrate today, which was, if you don't know what it is, was the time that God came down in spirit and he went over the land of Egypt and he wiped out everything that was firstborn. Just done, gone. Essentially the last plague that he had put upon the land of Egypt in order for Pharaoh to let his people go. Anyway, so like I said, they were at that dinner, which happens to also be the last dinner or the last supper that Christ was at with his disciples. And at this supper was his last opportunity to really show and set the example that's going to really set in. So when he goes on and ascends back into heaven and goes back to the Father, they're going to be left with one of the most critical examples possibly given, so that they can continue to be like Christ. So they continue to make disciples that make disciples that make disciples. At the supper, Christ took it upon himself to play the role of a servant, and he wanted to wash his disciples' feet. And so he comes to Peter to wash his feet. And Peter's like, dude, what are you doing? You just don't do that. That's disgusting. That's for a servant. They do that. You will never wash my feet. But Jesus says to him, what I am doing, you do not understand. You will understand later. Washing feet is something that was super common and like really necessary, a custom to do. Like how we wash our hands when we're about to eat, it's just sanitary. The same thing with them. That was their washing of their hands, because they didn't sit upright at a table in a chair. That wasn't there. That wasn't their custom. Rather, they sat at really low tables and just kind of lounged and ate and everything. And so that said, your feet are like that far away from your grapes and bread and fish. I wouldn't want no stinky feet, that close to my meal. So it was important to wash feet before you entered somebody's house, and of course before you sat before a meal. So he set the sanitary example, which they already knew anyways, but washing feet was something to say, I am washing you of your sin. I'm just setting a physical example of doing that. Peter didn't understand that at first when he's like, oh, okay, if I'm not going to be a part of you, then make sure you clean everything. But Jesus's example was like, look, I just need to wash your feet. And that's to set the example that if you don't let me do this, if you don't let me wash your feet as a symbol of me washing and cleansing you of your sin, then you have no share of me. But if you want to be a part of me, then you will allow me to continue to wash your feet, to set the example that your soul has been cleaned. But not all of you are going to be clean, because he was referring to Judas, who the devil had put into his heart to go betray him. And you would think, why was Judas even a disciple, or what happened? Jesus chose him just to hopefully have hopefully set enough examples that he would turn from his sinful ways and choose the path of Christ. But that's the best part about freedom. Jesus didn't make him like, well, now that you're my follower, you have to do this. That was Judas's choice. And unfortunately, that was the necessary thing to happen to fulfill the prophecies, is Jesus had to get crucified. He had to die so that you and I can be forgiven for our sins. But now that I have shown you to wash your feet, to wash you of your sins, now you guys need to do this too to each other. And I know that was very hard for you guys in the beginning, because when I chose you as my disciples, you guys weren't exactly all BFFs. You all had some beef. And now you have learned to see by my example that it is super important that you do this for everybody. I have served you at the lowest of low of positions of washing your all's dirty feet, because I love you. There isn't a title that matters, just because I love you. Now you are to take my example and go serve others, no matter what, wholeheartedly, the way I have cleansed you and washed you wholeheartedly. It's about paying it forward. It's about blessing other people. It's about putting aside your silly little titles and whatever you have in your mind to make you feel like you're better than the next person, because God made all of us equal. And if we don't serve others, then we are not serving the kingdom, because God sent Jesus down to serve us, cleanse us, help us, lead us, guide us, and on I can go, so that we are equipped in every way possible to lead by his example, so that the kingdom can still continue and advance. And the kingdom is still going to continue. There's no stopping the kingdom. It's done. The war at the end of time is already won, and I can't wait to be a part of it. But for now, since we're still on earth, we still have to set the example. So again, washing your feet is just not only as a sign of cleanliness, but it's a sign of serving. No matter how far up or down you are in the totem pole, that should not be something that we think about. We should only be desiring to help other people in every way possible, and setting the example that that's what we need to do for each other. Love one another, serve one another as Christ has served us. So, all right, guys, let's get started.
I'm beginning my project using my 1-inch tip flat brush or wash brush with the color Prussian blue hue mixed in with some GAC 500 or GAC 500, which stands for Golden Artist Colors. That is an artist grade gloss accenter for acrylic paints to fill in the background. I only bring it down about 3/4 of the way or so, maybe a little more, and leave the rest of it blank because the mountains will be there in the foreground. Even though this is an opaque color, I'll still need to apply a second coat so it dries pretty dark. Working on a white canvas is great because it makes your colors really bright because it's so light underneath, but for me, I feel like I need that extra layer to make it its true color. Although if you use a black canvas, you may only need one coat. Here it is with 2 coats, so now I'm going to use my number 12 fan brush that's been dipped into some titanium white and using my flat brush to gently tap it so that little bitty specks come off to look like little stars. They may get covered up, which is fine. I can always paint some more in. I'm also going to adjust my lighting here for you guys so you can see more since it's basically one big glare for you. This is going to be a challenge for me because although it looks bright enough for you, it's actually really dark for me. Believe it or not, my main light is off with the blinds closed, so all I have on now is one standing light and it's facing away from me. There, that's better. Now I'm just going to use an assortment of iridescent paints in no particular order or pattern either. After all, there's no correct way or specific look to paint the northern lights. They're typically not stationary lights anyways, and they are seen in more ways and colors than we can count, so don't be afraid to do whatever you want. It'll look great either way. I know this looks like a ton of paint, and it is more than I'm used to putting down myself, but I want to see how the colors work blending. Plus, I can always paint back in more Prussian blue hue to tone it down and soften it up. All I'm doing is wiping my brush off between each brush stroke to remove any excess paint, but my brush is still pretty saturated with my colors, which are Dreamy Lemon Yellow, Fiery Red, Precious Mint Green, and Electric Plum Purple. So I'm using my number 12 fan brush to blend the colors in, and all I'm doing is brushing upwards with some curves. I knew it would be a lot of paint, like I said earlier, but again, I'm not worried about it. It's just paint. I'm really just experimenting here, so unfortunately, I can't say what I'm doing step by step because I'm doodling more than anything, so I hope you at least enjoy watching the process. You'll see I've blended more Prussian blue hue back in as well as more iridescent paints, and I'm still figuring out what I like and how I want to make changes to my composition. You may find yourself doing the same thing, and that's not a bad thing. Painting should never be rushed anyway, rather it should be relaxing. So don't be afraid to make changes if you're not happy and or just want to experiment. Okay, so now that I've calmed it down from what started as a big smeary mess, I'm now satisfied and have a good balance between all my colors. So I'm going to switch brushes to my 1/4-inch tip flat brush to top it off with a phosphorescent paint, which is just a fancy name for a glow-in-the-dark paint. Its pigments are a copper-doped zinc sulfide, which have the ability to absorb energy from a light source, which needs to be charged or placed under a light first in order to illuminate. This is a transparent paint, so you should still be able to see all the iridescent paints underneath just fine. For the foreground, I'm now switching to some high viscosity acrylic paints, or also known as heavy bodied, so I'll have an imposter look to my mountains, which is just a raised textured appearance. I start off with carbon black as the base coat using an angled edge palette knife. This one says it's number 3, yet I have another exactly like it that says it's number 4, so I'm just not sure what the difference is between them, because up against each other, they literally look identical. Anyway, I use the blow dryer to dry the base coat off and then apply some titanium white and mostly apply it to the right sides of the mountains. This is another section that I'm just experimenting with. Painting with a palette knife versus a brush is definitely apples to oranges, and I'm not that experienced painting with a palette knife. So again, I just hope you enjoy watching the process of my continued doodling, going back and forth with carbon black and titanium white to not only give me shadows and obvious snowy areas, but some shades of gray too. Since my stars got covered up, I'm just going to paint them back in here using a very small mandala dotting tool with some more titanium white, only I switched back to my lower viscosity version. Alrighty, here's the close-up, and I am loving all those colors and how the light reflects them. So now let's turn off the light and see how it looks in the dark. Yes, I love it. Good choice. Glad I did that. Okay guys, what a neat way to use specialty paints. I am so happy how this turned out. But before I forget, all the paints and supplies are listed in the description should you give this painting a go for yourself. So this concludes this tutorial, and if you liked it, please be sure to not only share it, but to also hit like and subscribe for more videos. But more importantly, remember to thank God for this opportunity and always paint from the soul. See you next time. Bye.